because the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, has been accused of suggesting that everyone arrested in connection with the riots must be guilty. Yes, campaigners have urged the Home Office to delete this tweet, which referred to more than 1,000 people being detained by the police, and it refers to them as criminals. Now, this comes as magistrates are being ordered to delay locking up criminals to ease prison crowding. I guess the question is here, should the Home Secretary apologise? I mean, this tweet has been left up for quite a while now. But is she presuming these people guilty before they've had fair trial, Bill?
No, I mean, this is a phony story. I mean, one, it wasn't a tweet.
Is it?
Yeah, it wasn't a tweet from Yvette. It was a Home Office
Well, she's the
tweet.
boss, isn't she, in a way?
It didn't say that all those arrested are guilty. It did not refer to any individual cases or any legal proceedings.
No, but it gave a number.
Yeah, but on the broader point, in terms of, do we have sympathy for what happened a couple of weeks ago, I've got a very clear view that immigration is too high and it needs to be reduced.
Right.
And people should be able to debate and discuss that. But I have no sympathy for the people who were firebombing hotels, who were throwing bricks at the police and who were storming mosques. And we had to tackle that.
Well, I don't think anyone, well, obviously there will be some people, but I don't think many people out there have any sympathy with that. The question is whether this is a responsible tweet from the Home Office, which Yvette Cooper runs.
Well, I agree with one thing on Bill. I'm sure Yvette Cooper, I hope Yvette Cooper isn't sitting in her office designing her own tweets and sending them out on
We're going seriously wrong if she is.
On behalf of the Home Office. That would be a serious waste of her time. But she is nonetheless, as you say, responsible, and it has stayed up a long time despite the objections. The fact of the matter is that for those people who are pleading guilty, this doesn't matter either way. But for those who will be choosing, and there will be some who are pleading not guilty, this clearly threatens to prejudice a fair trial. Because if the Home Office is actually going out and saying effectively that anyone who's arrested is a criminal, which is the implication here, and it's more than the implication, it's very clear, is a criminal, that is going against the presumption of innocence, which is a sort of foundation of English law and of our freedoms.
Yes, if she said...
if I'd been arrested wrongly, I was nowhere near any of the riots, I'm glad to say, but if I was arrested wrongly and I was brought in front of a court and I pleaded not guilty, I'd be arguing seriously, I'm not even convinced I can get a fair trial as a result of this. And that's that's why you need to be so careful about the language you use. And the Home Office has become this sort of thuggish organisation that puts out pub talk, effectively. And she could have easily stepped in and said quietly to her staff, look, just take that down and reword it. But she hasn't done so.
Well,
I wonder why.
In terms of criticisms of the Home Office, I'll trade blows with you. I think, John Reid once described the Home Office as unfit for purpose, and I think under successive governments that's been the reality for far too long. But the first responsibility of government is to maintain law and order.
No, I'm with you on that.
You've had to go, Daniel. Let me finish my point. A couple of weeks ago, we came the closest I've seen to completely losing control of the situation in this country. And if the government, with the police, with the judiciary, hadn't acted incredibly swiftly, got people into court and started jailing them, I think the situation would have got completely out of control. The fact that we did, I actually think, was a measured success.
OK, well,
I'm not disagreeing in any of that. This is all irrelevant. The question is, when people come before the court, should the Home Office be pleading not guilty? Should the Home Office have already predetermined that they are guilty and put that out?
And if you look at the detail of the words, that's not what the Home Office
says.
is.
Exactly what it says. These criminals next to a number of arrests. If they'd just written criminals will be. But it's these criminals, which makes it...
It doesn't refer to any specific cases or any legal proceedings.
It doesn't refer to a specific...
Isn't it?
It's a tweet.
It's clearly what it's doing.
I think it's quite clear that it's not a suitable tweet for the Home Office to be putting out. And I am genuinely surprised that the Home Secretary hasn't said, you know what, let's delete that one, because it's been up there for days. But this brings us on to the issue of overcrowding in our prisons, because, yes, the criminal justice system has been very swift indeed, hasn't it, to lock up people involved in riots, whether it's online or in real life, throwing things at the police, going after mosques, whatever it was. They will be banged up. We know that if they haven't already. However, At the same time, we know that on September the 10th, we're going to have 2,000 criminals released early. We know that on October the 22nd, we're going to see another 1,700 criminals, released early. We know magistrates' courts are now being told, actually, don't bang people up yet because there's no space in prison. We are becoming less safe as a result of the situation in our criminal justice system and in our prisons. What on earth is the solution?
I don't think there's evidence that we're becoming less safe as a result of that. What we've
done... Well, I think there is. We've just had a convicted child rapist escaping jail. The judge said because of the crowded prisons, he'll get a suspended sentence.
Yeah.
I don't that's a threat, surely.
Yeah, it is potentially a threat, but the fact is that everyone... I'm looking now not at the people being released early. What we've done is made prison sentences longer and longer and longer and longer over the last 20 years without any real benefits to public safety from that. You might say, oh, well, we must be safer because they're in prison, so they can't be doing anything to us. But in fact, crime we are not getting any safer, and the sort of violent and dangerous crime that we're really worried about here, we're not talking about accountancy fraud and so on, but the violent and dangerous crime we're talking about has not significantly improved, and it doesn't if you bang people up for longer and longer. Every person who goes to jail, with the exception of the IPP prisoners I've been campaigning for, every person who goes to jail has an end of their sentence. There is a date on which they're going to come out. Sometimes it's after 50%, sometimes it's after 70%, sometimes it's after 100%. Now, for some people who are not thought to be threatening, it'll be 40%. When they come out whether they're dangerous or not. That's how it works. That's how the system works. You serve your sentence and you come out. And it doesn't matter how dangerous you are, you walk out through that door.
I'm not buying that, so we shouldn't be worried. We shouldn't be worried at all about prisoners being released only 40% of the way through their sentence. We may as well just close all prisons.
I don't know what good prison is actually doing, and I think there's a lot of rethinking that should be done about prisons. But the fact is, we are going to release them anyway in a matter of weeks. If in some cases, whether we release them at the end of 40% of their sentence or 50%, because most of these prisoners serve 50% of their sentence. If we're going to release them at the end of 40% rather than 50%, we're going to have to face this risk at some point in the very near future. I do not think there is a material addition to risk.
Well, I mean, that's all fine in theory, but if I were the victim, of a crime and I saw the perpetrator of that crime being let out of prison early or not even making it into a prison cell because of overcrowded prisons, I'd be absolutely furious.
And I think you'd be right to be concerned, and there are real concerns in this situation, but this is emphatically the responsibility of the last government. Rishi Sunak was told repeatedly by Alex Chalk, the Justice Secretary, that he had a choice. You either override local objections and build more prison places, or you agree to early release. Sunak shamefully did neither of those and just left it in the in tray for the Labour government to pick up when we came to power. Now, we are tackling it. I think the only alternative we had at this stage was early release. Daniel is right. There is always early release, and part of the reason you have early release is to manage the prison population, that if you don't give prisoners an incentive to behave through early release, then you lose control in the prisons. But, you know, reluctantly, we've had to agree to moving to 40%. There's a whole series of safeguards in place, but I wish we weren't here.
But is the only job of prison to stop reoffending? I mean, a lot of people see it as punishment and just to keep people off the streets if they're a hazard to the rest of us. Yeah,
but there's a trade-off, isn't there? I mean, you can punish people by sending them to jail for 30 years. You can punish them by sending them to jail for 10 years. Now, there's another side to that as well, which is the cost. And the cost of maintaining them in prison, that's the first thing. So there's a straightforward expenditure that you're saying we're going to lock somebody up for 30 years for a crime that, you know, a couple of decades ago they'd have got 10 years, but now they'll get 30 years. So the first is you're going to have a huge cost on the public purse, which manifestly we're struggling to afford. And Rachel Reeves would be the first to acknowledge that we're struggling to afford things. But the second thing is you're not doing any good to them, particularly from a punishment point of view. And you have to ask yourself about reoffending. Most people who do violent crime, most of them, tend to be young males. And there comes a point where, you know, you're in jail, you've done your 10 years, you're 50, you're not a young male anymore. And the longer you stay in jail, all that's happening is you're becoming less and less fit to be returned to society in a situation...
I take
that's
your
a broader,
point on that.
fair point. And the reality is that about 30% of prisoners go on to re-offend when they leave prison. We've got to tackle that longer term.
Yes, but I think we're almost talking cross purposes, because my point is that if you go through the criminal justice system and then you don't find yourself in a prison cell, how can that be working if under normal circumstances you would have been put in prison? I'm not sure community orders, suspended sentences...
And Emily, that's where I agree with you. This is a crisis. It's not a crisis of this government's
Well,
making.
they're the ones who are going to have to sort it out. They wanted the job. They wanted the job.
No, I'm not
and I do worry...
I agree with Bill about this, in case you think there's any argument. I mean, Labour did not create these circumstances. They have inherited them. This is one of the few things that you, unlike the public finances, which were perfectly transparent, Rachel and Reeves knew everything about. But they did inherit this. They knew it was coming, but they did inherit it, and there was inaction on the part of the previous
And you can't build new prisons overnight.
And you can't build a prison overnight. Now, I grant you all of that. But I'm simply saying that this measure, which I think is inevitable, should not cause public anxiety. And the second thing I'd say is it ought to give us pause to think about whether we really have achieved anything by having longer and longer prison sentences over the last 20 years.
I'm not sure you saying it shouldn't cause public anxiety is going to...
most of the people
is going to stop people from being pretty anxious.
Most of the people being let out are not violent criminals.
Well, I hope not. I hope not.
That's true. But also, Daniel, you said at the beginning of this section that there's not a relationship between locking people up and levels of crime, and that crime keeps going up. The reality is, for about 30 years, across all categories of crime, with the tragic exception of knife crime, crime has generally gone down in this country. So, you know, I think prison is having some impact.
I'm not sure about that. Police only solve about 5.5% of crimes. Of course, some of those will include lesser crimes, but a lot of those will be serious crimes. And, you know, there are huge problems. People call up the police and they don't get a proper response. People give up. You know, we have the recording of crime, but that doesn't show all of it.